After more than a decade of construction and diplomatic battles, Ethiopia has achieved what many thought impossible. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is now complete, and Ethiopia is preparing for its official inauguration set for September 2025. This is the story of Africa's largest infrastructure gamble, a $5 billion project that could reshape not only the continent's energy landscape, but how it finances similar projects. The numbers are actually staggering. The project stretches over 1.8 kilometers wide and is 145 meters high, with 74 billion cubic meters of water, which is enough to fill Lake Geneva 3 times over. This water body will be the 4th largest in the continent by volume when it's done. And when it's fully operational, the GERD will generate over 6,000 megawatts of power, more than doubling Ethiopia's current electricity production. But here's what makes this project truly remarkable. Ethiopia built it almost entirely with domestic financing. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, as I said earlier, is estimated to cost close to $5 billion, which is about 7% of the country's gross national product. To put this into perspective, it's like saying the United States spending close to $2 trillion on a single project. Most African projects have always relied very heavily on Chinese loans or other multilateral funding. And Ethiopia chose a different path because for diplomatic reasons. And the way it financed it is that the government issued domestic bonds, it mobilized its diaspora savings, and allocated some budgetary resources. As I said, this is not a financing model that it's but more out of necessity. African infrastructure projects rely heavily on Chinese loans or multilateral funding. Ethiopia chose a different path. The government issued domestic bonds, mobilized diaspora savings, and allocated budgetary resources. A financing model driven as much by necessity as by choice. Because the lack of international financing for projects on the Blue Nile has persistently been attributed to Egypt's campaign to keep control over downstream water flows. This domestic financing strategy obviously came with a lot of costs for Ethiopia. The macroeconomic position in Ethiopia is by persistent inflation, which has been over 30% for almost 3 years. And there's been a very acute shortage of foreign currency. And recently, the country defaulted on its sole Eurobond in December 2023, worth $1 billion. And the GERD wasn't just an engineering challenge. It became a geopolitical flashpoint regionally. And the tensions are likely to persist despite the project moving towards its completion. Egypt, which depends on the River Nile for 90% of its water supply, has viewed the GERD as an existential threat. Ethiopia started generating electricity from the hydropower dam, a project, as I said earlier, to be key to its economic development, but it has, at the same time, stirred a lot of tension with its neighbors in Sudan and Egypt. The diplomatic disputes have raged for years, obviously, with Egypt at various points threatening military action and seeking international intervention. But Ethiopia's response has always been to continue filling the dam despite these external pressures, which has always been a very clear sign that Ethiopia would not be deterred from its infrastructure ambitions. On 20th February 2022, the dam produced electricity for the first time, delivering 375 megawatts to the grid. Later on, other turbines were commissioned until the completion in September 2025. The installed capacity is still less than 6 gigawatts, with hydropower accounting for about 80% of that total. The GERD will now double this capacity, potentially transforming Ethiopia from an energy-poor nation into a regional power exporter. The economic stakes are really enormous, to be honest. The dam is expected to supply electricity domestically, obviously, and to neighboring countries, earning the country a foreign currency. This is seen to foster not just regional development and cooperation, but a good revenue source for Ethiopia, which really needs the funds to service its mounting debt obligations, including the defaulted Eurobond I mentioned earlier. But GERD's significance extends slightly far beyond Ethiopia's borders. In an era where Africa struggles to attract infrastructure investment, Ethiopia's Goita loan approach sends a powerful message about domestic resource mobilization and political will. As Ethiopia prepares for GERD's official inauguration, this month, several critical challenges remain, including ensuring that optimal turbine performance, managing the reservoir operations during the drought periods, and maintaining infrastructure over the expected 50-year lifespan of the dam. The project also raises uncomfortable questions about development trade-offs, because Ethiopia chose to pursue transformative infrastructure while its population faced food insecurity, and its economy grappled with hyperinflation. Is that a price worth paying? Some argue yes, some argue no. This project, launched in 2011 then Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, the GERD represents Africa's largest hydropower project. Whether it proves to be a visionary infrastructure development or an expensive white elephant will largely depend on Ethiopia's ability to monetize its new power generation capacity and manage the complex regional relationships it has strained. What's undeniable is that the GERD demonstrates that African countries can mobilize resources for transformative infrastructure when they have the political will to do so. And as the continent faces massive infrastructure deficits, Ethiopia's GERD experiment, with all its costs and controversies, offers both an inspiration and a cautionary lesson for the next generation of African mega projects. The inauguration is set for September 2025. The world will be watching to see if Ethiopia's $5 billion bet pays off. This is Samuel Gabriel. Thank you for tuning in.